Hey.
Hi, we're live. I'm just I kind of prepped it up so that you know how that build up the audience goes with the social media. So we have a couple of seconds before 8.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay.
Get all there. So we're just backstage, right? Or are we live?
We
You said.
are. Hey, we're live.
Hey,
I am not
hey,
playing any
can you
copyrighted music. Yep.
can you move us around so Michelle's more
Sure. Yep.
yeah.
Wait, let me try this out here. Hold on a second. Hold on.
Go, go.
Mm,
Let me stop. I have to be.
I'm trying. I gotta. Okay, how about there we go?
Okay, that's
That's
good. I just
fine.
want to make it clear
Okay.
she's doing
I
running.
was like super like this.
Okay. So we are live, and Michelle Rayner, the candidate for House District 70 in Florida, she's going to be taking call-ins. The call-in number is 813-221-9700. Thank you so much, Bridget Domingos. I'm so happy, excited to see you on. You're going to be taking charge of inquiring from Michelle Rayner on her candidacy for the viewers. Viewers, again, those of you who are watching live, you can either through the chat, comment section, ask questions of Miss Rayner-Goolsby this evening about her candidacy. But again, you can also call in live. 813-221-9700 is the call-in number. And I'm awaiting one more criminal defense attorney. So you're gonna have criminal defense attorneys today on the
Awesome.
on the
Awesome.
panel asking
I'm
me.
gonna
So
share on my
It's not like
Facebook
criminal
page.
defense attorneys like to talk or anything.
You know, I just shared on my Facebook. I have to always look down because
yeah,
y'all,
I'm
I
hearing
don't have it
myself.
where.
It's freaking me out.
Yeah.
I always have to look down because I can't. I don't have the ability to like. People can. I'm not that tech savvy.
Okay, so I sent Candice Colucci a link for her to join us, and she's kind of co-pilot. This is all Bridget this evening. This is all you, girl. So
I
I'm
don't know
gonna.
if anyone. I don't know if you think you're fooling someone, but Haiti, you're in front of a microphone. You're not a
No,
DJ. You're
I'm
a
gonna put
talker.
some
You're
duct
going
tape
to
on
be
my mouth.
speaking, and you know it.
No,
I
no,
if you
no.
don't ask at least one question pertaining to the database, I'd be shocked.
Oh, I'm
We.
gonna I'm gonna ask one question at least. Okay,
I'm
so
worried
listen,
for. I'm worried
We
prepared
do.
for it.
we're gonna get started. I don't know. We have a straggler. I just sent her the link, so I'll be waiting for her. She was throughout the other two interviews. She was like saying, "Where's the link? Where's the link?" So I just sent it. So, Michelle, good evening. Good evening,
Good
those of you
evening.
watching via Facebook and YouTube. Thank you for joining us. We have a powerhouse.
Oh,
A lot
thanks.
of people already know her locally. Yeah, you're quite a celebrity. You
Oh, don't
okay?
do this. Do
Oh
not do
yes,
this.
I am. I
Do
am. I am
not
gonna
do
do
this.
it. You. Okay, so Bridget, take it away. Thank you for joining me too today.
Absolutely. So, first off, thank you so much for being here with us tonight, Miss Rayner
Yes.
Goolsby. But let me just first say this: as much as Haiti said it as a joke, somewhat when she says you're a local celebrity, I wouldn't necessarily call you a celebrity. I would say that you're out there doing the work. I think you've
Thanks.
been referred to as a change agent more than anything. And I just wanted to, start this night off with you telling us a little bit about who is Michelle Rayner Goolsby. Let's start there.
Well, thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Thank
I cannot hear
Haiti.
Michelle. Can you hear her,
Can you
Haiti?
hear me?
I
Can you
can
hear
hear
me?
you fine. You can't hear her, Bridget. I can hear her fine.
I cannot hear her speaking.
Hold on. We want to make sure because
I can hear
Okay,
her.
we're good
you
now. We're
can.
good.
Okay,
You okay?
woo.
Okay. Oh, I was like, whoo. So I appreciate Haiti having me and then for the invite. Also, Bridget, it's so good to see you and just to be kind of be here and have this conversation. In full disclosure, we all know each other. We all practice, in and around in the same counties and the same courthouses. So it's been really good to see you guys here. But who am I? Well, I am a daughter of a social worker and a engineer who were born and raised in Pinellas County. My parents knew what segregation was. They went to Pinellas High when that was the only high school that Black folks could go to, right? And then they went to Gibbs Junior College, and my mom and former Commissioner Calvin Harris used to drive through the orange groves in Oldsmar to get to the University of South Florida. And so I've always been raised, to think about, where you came from. And, Bridget, you've been to my mother's house. So you walk in her house, there is a picture of Malcolm X and Jesus. Am I lying?
No.
So there is a picture of Malcolm X and Jesus, but that kind of informs the way that I grew up. And really in my house has been, to whom much is given, much is required. And I think I've been really blessed to have the parents that I have, to have the family that I have. My uncles have served House District 70. One of my uncles was the representative for HD 70 when it was 55. My other uncle was the first African-American secretary for the Department of Corrections. So when service is just who I am. And so when I actually went to law school, y'all, I was not trying to be a criminal defense attorney. Believe it or not, I'm just going to do this nice transactional stuff, just read the papers, make this, make this money and be done with it. And then I interned at a public defender's office in this small town outside of Jacksonville, in Palatka, Florida. And literally it changed my life, and it really got me onto the road that I am here now. And so I'm happy to be here. I'm ready to serve, and let's go, guys.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you went ahead and let all of our viewers know that we do know each other. Speaking of which, I was thinking that puts you, or do you think that the fact that you are so well known, not only here in Pinellas, but I know that District 70 will encompass Manatee as well as Hillsborough. As a criminal defense attorney, you cover all of those areas. Mm-hmm. So you're familiar with all of them as well. So do you think that gives you a little more perspective about the needs of each of those communities?
Yeah, because I haven't just been, in one community, right? So, it encompasses a little bit of Hillsborough. Obviously, we've all practiced in Hillsborough, encompasses Manatee, we've all practiced in Manatee. And not only when you practice, but you guys can attest, you get to know your clients, you get to know who they are, you get to know their families, you get to know the environment that makes up their life. And so I think that, it gives me a comfortability level of being able to assess needs, but it also lets me know that there's still a lot of work to be done. And I can't just rest on the fact that, I practice here or I practice there and that be it. But it really, it provides a doorway and an opening for me to really get to talk with folks and assess their needs. And so one of the questions I always get, they're like, well, you have, Manatee, North Sarasota County, you have Hillsborough and Pinellas. How are you going to go between all of those counties? And I'm like, yeah, I'm a criminal defense attorney. All of us know what it is to have to be in one courthouse at the same time for, a pretrial. You have to be in 3 different counties at 8:30, but how you have to be able to juggle and how you have to be able to make sure that you are doing everything that you need to do for the client in Pinellas, for the client in, Hillsborough, for the client maybe in Pasco. And so I think that it's about prioritizing, and I think it's about making sure that, your word is your bond and you have a good team with you.
Absolutely. So I know that you mentioned a moment ago that when it comes to this particular seat, you're ready to serve. You come from a long line of those that have served. So what are some of the top things, and we can go ahead, and I know someone else asked someone the top 3 things. What's your platform? What are the 3 things you're most passionate about that you'd hope to see get done during this session?
Well, one of the things that I think that we need to work on is unemployment. So And I think that all of the issues that I'm going to highlight are intersecting, right? You can't just take one of them in silos. They all intersect each other. And I think that coronavirus has confirmed a lot of things that a lot of us have been talking about, that we've identified as problems. And that it's kind of like, yeah, this is a problem. Like, this is a problem. And unfortunately, the coronavirus has confirmed that and has put a spotlight on that. So one of the things is that we need to have a major overhaul of the unemployment system. It is still unconscionable that people have applied for unemployment in March and they're still not able to get unemployment now in July. I was on a call with Charlie Chris, and he had his constituents calling in, and there were several individuals saying, listen, I've applied in March and I still don't have any unemployment. And then I think that we need to think about, so not only streamlining the process, but we need to think about extending the amount of time folks can be on it, because, the pandemic has left a lot of folks and a lot of businesses just in a lurch, just kind of up and down. So that's one of the first things that I think that needs to immediately happen on day one. But also, we know in District 70, there's an affordable housing crisis. and not just folks are not able to purchase homes, they're not able to rent. So folks are, where they may have lived for their whole lives, they're not able to, stay there and work in the same communities. And also intersecting with that, you have an education equity issue, because if the kid doesn't have a stable home, then how are we expecting a child to be able to learn? But then also thinking about how are we allocating monies to public schools, and why do certain schools have more resources than other schools? So I think those are some of the main issues that I would be looking at, coming up on this session. And of course, obviously, criminal justice reform. Last justice reform, pretty much we're killed. Pretty much we're not able to move. But there's some significant issues that I think all three of us can attest to when it comes to criminal justice reform. I just got an article about, 5 girls being, handcuffed and, because they were walking, and one getting Baker acted. There's a problem when we think about how the law enforcement's relationship is with the community. And I think that, I'm really encouraged by what, St. Pete Police Department has done and the strides that they're making, but we still have a long way to go.
Okay, and let's talk a little bit about some of these issues for one, but you just hit on St. Pete Police Department. So that was some of those actions that they're taking now with the reallocation, the defunding, whatever term we're wanting to use. First off, let me ask you this: do you have a problem with the word defund, for one, and for two, or are you of the school of thought that we know what it means, and as long as it's happening, we want the result more than the name change? So,
Right.
what are your feelings on defunding the police, as well as, can you elaborate a little more on what it is St. Pete is doing?
Right. So I don't have an issue with defunding the police, right? But I understand that when people hear that word, it's triggering. They're like, what does this mean? I have, older family members who are like, what is this? What does this mean? What is defunding? We need to keep the police. And I'm like, so, okay, we're saying that you can't keep the police. So I think of it as a divest, reinvest model, or I've said before, reimagining our relationship with law enforcement. So I think one of the beautiful things that St. Pete has done is finally taking the steps to say, listen, our officers are responding to things that they don't need to be responding to, or they may not be equipped to be responding to. If someone is having a mental health crisis, law enforcement should not be the initial folks that need to be responding to that. It should be a licensed mental health social worker or a therapist or those kinds of things. And so I think that, and even, St. Pete, they're in the process of reevaluating their use of force. And also looking at their equipment and what equipment do they need. So I have to be encouraged that they're acknowledging it, that they're taking steps to make sure that they can engender trust with the community and with law enforcement. I think that we have a long way to go, but I think that this is a step in the right direction. And I'm encouraged by St. Pete Police Department, hoping that other departments would soon take, same or similar steps, because we know that there is a problem with how the community and law enforcement coexist. And I think that, we can get into, a very policy wonk conversation about that, but we have it as it is right now. So what are we going to do to make sure that we can reimagine our relationship, to make sure folks feel safe around law enforcement? I have friends who are law enforcement officers, and it breaks their heart to hear that folks don't feel safe around them. And these are great guys. I have a friend that works for St. Pete Police Department that came back to St. Pete to be a police officer in the neighborhood in which he grew up in. And it breaks his heart that, folks don't trust them, but he came back to show, to engender that kind of trust. So those are some things that I think that's being done right. But the defunding the police, I get the term maybe, nerve wracking, but I agree, Bridget, as long as it's happening.
Yeah. Tomato, make it happen.
Right.
All right. So I'm just going over each one of the points that you mentioned would be one of your things you'd be most passionate about. So let's go back to unemployment for a moment. So I know that you're a small business owner here in town, correct? Yeah. Okay. Yes. And it's my understanding you employ several women, several other minorities. And so what can we do specifically, or what can others that have been affected by the pandemic, other than just wait around on unemployment, how can we help create other job opportunities within the community, such as what you've already done for others?
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think we have to be really creative, right? Because right now we have a lot of people who are waiting on unemployment and they're not getting it. I think one of the things that the legislature can do, and one of the things that, in fact, the governor can do, is really invest into small businesses. Small businesses are the lifeblood of our communities. You're a small business owner, Bridget. Haiti's a small business owner, and it's really the lifeblood of our communities. And so that's one of the ways that I think that we can kind of help with kind of this unemployment situation. And when I say reinvest, let there be, incentives for folks to be able to hire people or for them to be able to open a business. Because, I was asked a question last night on another forum about, well, tourism is the lifeblood of Florida. What do you think that we need to do about tourism? I'm like, well, first off, we need to get COVID under control before we can talk about anybody coming in. And before we can talk about anybody coming in, let's reinvest it. Let's invest in these small businesses so that people are able to hire out. People are able to, employ other folks. People are able to sustain and keep their employees that they already have.
Understood. And so with the housing that you mentioned people can't purchase or rent even at this rate. What would you be able to do to ease some of those burdens or concerns for the community?
Right. So one of the issues that is that's really prevalent in Tallahassee is the Sadowski Trust Fund. The Sadowski Trust Fund is specifically for affordable housing, but many times this was the first year, I think, in maybe ever, but definitely the first year in quite a long time, this last session, that the Sadowski Trust Fund was fully funded, meaning that monies for the Sadowski Trust Fund wasn't taken from another, wasn't taken and allocated to something else. And so one, we need to make sure that it's fully funded and that those monies are going to the organizations in the cities and all the things that it needs to go to. But also when I think about renting, we have a lot of like anti-tenant statutes on the books. So I think that we need to review those things and think about maybe either repealing them or amending those statutes, because we have those on the books and it makes it harder for folks to be able to know what their rights are. And one of the things that the City Council of St. Pete did, I think it was Council Member Amy Foster Brown that was the proponent of this, is to have a tenant's bill of rights. So when you are renting a property, what your rights are as far as, what eviction would look like, it's laid out what your rights are. So those are some of the things that I think that we need to be able to tackle. And also I think that we need to incentivize affordable housing in a way that is actually affordable. In District 70, there are certain areas, specifically I'm thinking about Bartlett Park, where they're building homes. And I'm like, well, who can afford this home? Not most certainly the people that have lived in Bartlett Park their whole life. So you're building this home and it's beautiful, but you're not building it for the people that live there. So why is that? And so that's something else that I think that is, we can talk about affordable housing and building all these things, but are you building with the people in mind who already live in these neighborhoods?
Gotcha. And of course, of all the things you mentioned, you've made some great points already, but the one that's near and dear to my heart and probably always will be is the topic of education. In addition to being an attorney, I'm a certified educator. I was in the classroom for several years. I know you've been very active volunteering through Menace and mentoring programs throughout Pinellas County, especially. But when you say education equity, what would you do differently, or what can we do?
I mean, I think, well, first off, my wife is a former educator and a huge education and equity advocate. So, I think that watching her and watching, her colleagues, and even you, Bridget, you still advocate, in the classrooms as well, even though you're still in the capacity as an attorney. One of the things is that I think that we really have to look at the intersection of the equity in education and as it relates to the school to prison pipeline, right? And that when there is a lack of equity in education, it literally feeds into the school to prison pipeline. So one of the things I think is super important is having wraparound services in schools, meaning that, if a child may be acting out, what type of discipline is the first piece? Why are you automatically going to go to suspend? Do you know what's going on with this kid? Do they have food? Do they have mental health issues? But you can't properly assess that if you're not funding the public schools, because all of those things cost money, right? And all of those things cost money to be able to fund. And so I think that we have to really look at using taxpayer money to equitably fund all of the schools within our state, and specifically within District 70. And so, so that's number one. Number two, making sure that teachers have a living wage, because I understand that there's some disparity right now. I know that Governor DeSantis just signed a new law in with regard to teacher pay, but making sure that that's protected and making sure that our teachers are not having to have 2 and 3 jobs, and making sure that, before he signed that bill, and I think we were 45th in the nation for teacher pay. I don't know where we're at now, but I can't foresee that we've skyrocketed that much further. So, I mean, these are the things that we need to think about when we talk about equity in education, and when we think about even the term defunding, I kind of get interested when people are like, oh, don't defund the police. I'm like, but we've defunded education at every turn. So if we can defund education and, we have a toll road to nowhere that costs billions of dollars, you're telling me you can't take a sliver of that money and put it into our schools?
The only thing interesting about that is when you say we defunded education, the first thought that went to my mind is, did we ever fund education? You know what I mean? Like
that whole part,
if we're being honest. All right, I see Candace has joined us. Candace,
Hi, everyone. How are you?
Hey, Candace, how are you?
Hi.
Very, very good. Very good. Happy Friday night.
Absolutely. Michelle gets the 8 o'clock hour.
Yes.
I know.
Yes, she does. And the call-in number is 813-221-9700. Michelle is ready to take your calls. The public out there, particularly the electorate, those who she will represent if she wins. Now's your time to either through the chat feature, write in your questions, comments, or call in 813-221-9700.
And while we're waiting on them to call Michelle, since all of us ladies here practice criminal defense in one way or another, maybe you could tell us a little bit. You talked a lot about education and the pipeline and things of that nature. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about what you see in criminal justice, period, and how that could affect your constituents?
Mm-hmm. Whew. I mean, where do I start, right? We have a colleague, all of us have a colleague, and I'll tell you offline who it is, who, when he donated to me, he said, I need you, I know this is a pipe dream, but I need you to look at mandatory minimum sentencing. And I was like, friend, like, if you know I could do anything about that, I would. But all of us know on this, call right now, that to me, that's one of the biggest issues. And I always go back to the very, very first case I ever had. I was an intern at the Jacksonville PD's office. And it was a man that had it was a felon in possession of a firearm. So y'all know there's already the minimum mandatory right there. Well, the felon in possession of a firearm, the facts were his neighbor was shooting off a gun. His neighbor was like 85, was shooting off a gun. And he went to take the gun from him because it was 4th of July. He went to take the gun from him and he put it up, and he hadn't had the opportunity to give it back to him. And I guess he got into tips with his partner, and she said, oh, he has a gun in there. Boom. It was in the drawer. It was put up, whatever. His neighbor even said, oh, yes, that was my gun. He did take it from me. It was like literally like within 24 hours. Right. And so I was like an intern, so I wasn't trying the case, but it was like my first like trial, and I was like a CLI, and of course, he was found guilty. And even with the jury knowing all of the facts, and the judge looked at the supervising attorney and said, if you could find case law for me anywhere, even if it's from another state, that would say that I don't have to sentence him to these 3 years, please provide that to me. And I'll do what I can. And we weren't able to find any. And so this man who was literally doing a good deed was sentenced to 3 years in prison because of this minimum mandatory, because the judge had no discretion, and the prosecutor, who we all know is the most powerful person in the courtroom, refused to say, well, this is an easy conviction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the people that are listening, The thing about those mid-mans are so imperative because people don't know they exist. They don't even understand that they even are a concept. So that's one of the big issues. And you remember for a while they had those billboards out that were the 10/20
Thanks.
life. Do you remember
Yeah,
that? It
I
was
do.
actually a movement to say if you're
Hmm.
going to create these insanely harsh punishments that are going to be completely lacking of any discretion or looking at the actual specific facts of the case in order to allow those mitigating factors, you're just going to blindly say if this is what they do and these are and this is what they behave in, this is going to be the charge no matter what. And so
Yeah,
that is those severe consequences that most people don't even know exist. And so
a
that's one of the
hundred.
issues is one, them not knowing, even understanding what a mid-man is, mandatory minimum, all that kind of stuff. They don't understand it. And then two is the fact that you're taking away those facts of the case. And that's just really probably one of the most disappointing things about it because that's what we're seeing so much, especially with the juveniles.
A
That's a
hundred
huge
percent.
issue.
100%. And like I said, that, min mans are my pipe dream. But I think that if, we think about what we really could do, is, I think that there's space for work around juvenile justice, even
Mm-hmm.
juvenile diversionary programs and what those really
Oh
look
yeah.
like in its application. And I know all of us, especially you, Bridget, you, when you were at the PD, were like in juvenile justice. And, what are we actually really doing to even prevent our kids from becoming into the system, right? And as far as, I know through Minutes, we were able to get the jobs program that, Senator Roussan was able to get, funding for. And we were able to have, a jobs program that even kids who may have had felonies, they were able to, work at these jobs and actually, kind of not get back in trouble and not steal cars or do whatever. So I think that we have to really look at, when we think about direct filing, District 70, it encompasses, like I said, South Pinellas, Manatee County, North Sarasota, and a little bit of Hillsborough. All counties that are known for what? Direct filing juveniles, right? Who are all known for direct filing Black and brown kids. And I think that we got to look at how direct files play a role when we think of juvenile justice. And so those are one of the issues that a specific area that I would love to tackle. But I think that also we have to really think about protecting Amendment 4, right? We understand right now it's back under review with the courts. And, even if it does go our way, you got to believe that train is not going to be late. You got to believe that folks are going to try another way to, institute a poll tax to say that returning citizens can't vote. So I think that we have a lot of issues going on. And then we have a speaker, that incoming speaker, Chris Sprouse, who used to be a prosecutor right here in Pinellas, Pasco, that, has been killing, criminal justice reform bills. So, it's going to be a fight, and it's an uphill battle for sure.
Haiti, did we have any call-ins?
We have not yet. No, the call-in number again, 813-221-9700. So now we're talking about a criminal justice system. This will be my only question, I promise. And I've already been talking to
I bet she says the word Barlow. No,
you're bad,
been on one or
Bridget.
two panels.
That was a good one. I walked right into that.
It's all you, Haiti. What do you have for us?
So you called it. That's what I have. And you know what? Michelle's been very receptive, I got to say, in the past couple of weeks, hearing me out when she's had time in her busy schedule because campaigning is brutal. But she's been receptive to hearing me about it. He's going to be on next week, Thursday. He's going to do a demo. So if you can't catch it while it's live,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's pre-recorded. You can catch it. Here's the thing. I've been working with him for about a year because somebody introduced me. They told me that there was a write-up, I think, in the Florida Bar News. And so I contacted him as they were doing the Criminal Justice Summit out here in Tampa a couple of years ago. So I called him because I wanted to set up an interview. And he said, I happen to be here in Tampa. And I said, oh, my gosh, you want to have dinner? And we did at a local Cuban restaurant. He brought out his laptop, showed me the demo, and I thought, this is wonderful. And Michelle, that a couple of years ago, the Herald Tribune out here in the Sarasota Manatee area, they did a series on bias from the branch, and they showed through a series of reports that Black men get more prison sentence than their white counterparts. That was the impetus for this gentleman, who's an attorney, right, up in Jacksonville, to have developers, right, create a database to be able to do comparisons. We all know as criminal defense practitioners that there's a score sheet, right? We're talking about min-mans. We're talking about a score sheet where there's a minimum amount of prison that the score sheet calls for, right? And it's supposed to be uniform, right? But it's not, and we know that. And so there's a system in place right now that can do a comparison, right? Somebody that the state attorney, whichever in the 67 counties, is saying, this is what we're recommending, this is what we're seeking. But this system, this database, can do a comparison with that defendant that they're seeking prison time for with others in the past that are similarly situated in order to counter disparate sentencing and to ask to challenge that legally by way of making a equal protection argument, right? Under our federal and state constitution. That database is already operational. 5 public defenders out of the 20 in the state have already implemented it. I want to give a shout out to public defender Julian Holt. I know, Michelle, you work for her, and you've in the past have given her praise for good things that you've seen her do. This is phenomenal that she was the second in the state to jump on that. I'm saddened to see that the Sixth Circuit doesn't have that yet, but I'm hopeful that they will come on board soon, as the rest of the public defenders in the state. Chris Sprouls, I reached out to him, and I thank him for responding via Facebook. Okay, I asked him about a database, criminal justice database, that was mandated in 2018 via legislation that he introduced, okay, and that passed. And we are still awaiting a criminal justice database. You know how important, we all know how important that is, to see trends in racial disparity or biases. So he informed me recently that it's about to come out. He says he's telling me that it's going to come out in 2021, early 2021. I just want you to speak to that.
Well, I mean, Haiti, you have definitely talked with me about it. And I think he's actually emailed me, and I've looked at it. I haven't had the chance to in-depth look at it. But from what you've shared with me and just the emails that I've seen, I actually have flagged it even for Ben Crump to say, hey, listen, I think there's something here. I think that, I'm on board, because if we are able to make sure that there is equity in the criminal justice system, whether it's by a database, whether it's by knowing how judges rule and how folks have with similar, score sheets have been, sentenced, I think that that's super important, because that is one step to get us to criminal justice reform, one other step to get us to equity. So I'm definitely not opposed to anything that's going to get us there. I'm definitely going to watch when he does the demo, because it'll give me an opportunity to really see it in real time and what it really looks like.
Okay, so the call-in number, again, we're having Michelle Williams. She's asking on the chat box what the call-in number is. It's 813-221-9700.
See, and I wasn't as worried that too many people hadn't called in yet for you, Michelle, mainly because I felt like, and I've watched all 3 this evening, or the both prior to you, and I felt like a lot of it was getting to know the candidates. And I feel like you're out there doing the work already, so maybe people feel like they know what you stand for, they know what you're advocating, because you're so present out in the community at this point, for sure. I guess one of the things we could talk about, and I know Candace, you and I were both at that peaceful protest the public defender's office put on, and I know that you were live at another one there in Tampa. Michelle, I know I've seen you through social media at more than I can count, advocating a peaceful protest, megaphone in hand. Haiti, I'm not sure if you made it out to any, but I will say,
of the protests.
Yes.
I have not, and I wanted to, but with the COVID issue, I'm the caretaker of someone that would be in what they call the vulnerable. So, but I've been doing work. It's not, I've shared these conversations with Michelle and with my friends. Sometimes I'm here and I felt guilty, like, geez, I wish I need to be out there, but I am doing something. And sometimes protest is not just, or activism is just not, there's various ways that you can do something without actually being at a
There's
protest.
No judgment. I was just asking because
I know you're not. I know you're not, Bridget. I know that there's all love from you.
No, what I was getting at for Michelle was that I know that myself and some other criminal defense attorneys were all representing some of the peaceful protesters that have been arrested. And you spoke a lot about criminal justice here. You know, a lot of arrests for unlawful assembly, bonds that we had never heard of before, even those held without bond. So even on a second-degree misdemeanor. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts on any changes for that, if you wanted to go on any of that, or if you could tell us a little bit about what you've done to kind of help with the bail issue regarding those that weren't able to bond themselves out because money was an issue. And we know how this criminal system affects the poor almost more than, anyone. Yeah.
Well, cash bail is a huge issue, and it affects folks, like you said, it affects the poor, it affects people that are, wouldn't have access to the money to bond out, especially folks who have low level or nonviolent criminal offenses. And so I was really disheartened to see that, and I don't know, there was a back and forth if it was the sheriff or if it was, or the chief judge that indicated, well, hey, listen, when you arrest these, protesters, they need to be held at zero bond. And I'm like, zero bond for an unlawful assembly? And then you're thinking zero bond during a pandemic, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's like unconscionable to me. And then understanding that, that when they set the bond in first appearance, it was $1,000 for a charge that someone either would get ROR'd for, they would get a notice to appear, or they wouldn't even get arrested. They would just say, go, just leave. And so one of the things is that I was connected to Matt Morgan, John Morgan's son, and he had already been, actively working around this issue of community bail program. And so I was able to speak with him and kind of share with him about what was happening in Pinellas and Hillsborough. Not so much Hillsborough, but definitely Pinellas. And he said, listen, we have monies. We have monies that are, allocated for this. Is about $250,000. And I want to make the record very clear. I do not touch that money. I have no access to that money. I cannot touch the money. I'm not on the bank account or anything. I want to be very clear about that, because I know how folks can be. I want to be very clear. I can't touch any of that money. But he had that. So what I was able to do for him is to say, here's a problem. You have a solution. And so right as it was getting implemented, there was such backlash with regard to the arrest and bonds amount of the protesters that it ended up actually not being used for the protesters. He ended up saying that he wanted to make sure that it was here kind of, indefinitely. And so what happened, I was able to connect public defender-elect Sarah Malo to him, and also Allison Miller, who we all know as well, to him. So we're actually able to identify folks who are in jail on low level offenses, or we had one kid that he needed to pay $300 to be able to go on PTI. So we were able to do that. And so that's kind of now the bond, this cash bail, this bond fund is here just indefinitely in Pinellas County, that the public defender is seeking, is identifying folks who are able to utilize it. Also, I got to shout out the Dream Defenders. They were a huge part in organizing it as well. They are also have their own bail, their own bond fund as well, bail fund. So being able to connect those two worlds together, because that was a world that kind of wasn't connected to the Dream Defenders to Matt Morgan and vice versa. It has been truly a blessing. And I've done a lot of work with the Dream Defenders, and I just want to shout them out for their consistency in this work.
Okay, we have a caller. Yay, Michelle.
Yes, ma'am. My attorney is for Attorney Rayner. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Okay, my thing is that young and new candidates that are running for different positions in different offices up in the Florida Senate and State House and the Florida House of Representative House. And when you go up there, you're already going to be against the grain. You know what I'm saying? I see your work here, you know what I'm saying, on the grounds, between Pinellas and across the Bay and the Tampa Bay area. You know what I'm saying? Somewhat of a rebel rouser. I like that. I'm all for that. My fist is pumping in the air for that type of action.
We know.
So my thing is, how willing are you? Because you know that I know enough about you that when something isn't right, you're going to speak on it. But I also know that you're going to come up against a great opposition when you're, you know what I'm saying,
Yeah.
if you're the successor and victor of this candidacy in this run to get up in Tallahassee. How willing are you to get this information back to activists such as myself on the ground, to put it out, use my social media platform, and also are you willing to go against the grain and also say, you know what, this is wrong, I'm about to file a lawsuit against you, and so we can get the job done, because that's one thing that we don't see. We don't see enough civil rights violation lawsuits in the federal court or in the Florida Supreme Court. And this is something we got to start leaving paper trails and say, you know what, even though I may have lost this round, but guess what, I got proof to say that I fought for it, because that's what we're not seeing from our local leadership here in the Tampa Bay area. People get up there and they talk a sweet game, and they come into they come to the fish fries and the barbecues and all this stuff and teas and conversation and all this good stuff, and it's yada yada yada, wooda wooda wooda. I ain't even with that. I'm not with that. So I just want to know your take on will you be willing to work with activists still on the ground, get us the information when things, what I'm saying, when you notice you ran it up against opposition, and are you going to be that willing House of Representative participant to say, you know what, I'm going to fight all the way. If I got to go to the courthouse and file a lawsuit, if I got to take it to the Florida Supreme, but I did my job for the people.
Yeah.
That's
So
a great question.
That's it.
That's a great question.
Stay on the
And
line, Michelle. Stay on the line.
thank you so much, Michelle. And I just want to first just shout out the work that you do, your consistency in the work. Because a lot of people say they do the work, but they're not consistent in it. And you are always consistent in the work. So I want to definitely shout that out and honor that. So as far as, I think that your question to me really is about accessibility, right? So, and I know really we get folks that get into elected office and all of a sudden their phone number has changed. You can't get them on no email. You can't get them on socials. So number one, 125% I'll be accessible. And number two, I work with activists. Like I am who I am. I work with activists. I am an activist. So I definitely feel that, there wouldn't be any lack of communication, and especially if there's certain issues and certain things that that need to be put forth on the floor or bills that need to be passed. And I actually welcome that, because here's the deal: when when you're in kind of that bubble of being just in the Florida House or being in the Florida Senate, you're not on the ground. So you don't know everything that's going on. So there's a reliance on activists. There's a reliance on constituents being able to share and provide that information, and us to have that exchange of information. So I don't think that anything with that would preclude me from that. And you obviously know I'm willing to speak truth to power. And, I always get the question, well, there's a lot of Republicans up there. And I said, well, listen, my whole job is working with folks that don't agree with me. I work with prosecutors every day that don't want to do anything that I want them to do. And I find a way to get them to do what I need them to do. And so I'm always going to be willing to speak truth to power. And as far as filing lawsuits, I will tell you that I know that there is a prohibition on a elected official suing, like elected official in the Florida House, like suing a governmental agency, because it's like a governmental employee. Yeah, it's kind of that whole thing. But I mean, here's the reality of the situation. I mean, if there's an injustice, there's an injustice. And, my position doesn't preclude me from not speaking truth to power and doing what I can do in the capacity that I'm in. So I can't say that I'm going to be able to sue depending on what it is, but I will say that I will do whatever I can do in the capacity that I'm in to make sure that folks are not disenfranchised, to make sure that or civil rights violations aren't occurring. So you have a way to get to me. So that's I'm gonna say it like this. That's on that. So.
Ms. Williams, do you have any other questions or comments that you'd like to share? And thank you for calling in.
Well, there's something else. I mean, with all of you ladies being attorneys, I just have a question that I work with this group out of Idaho, and the lady, she let me know that it's being talked about because she has some high powerful cousins you know what I'm saying, that are in Florida. And it's being told to me, and I want to see if you all have heard anything, that it's being rumored now that a judge can be sued personally for some things that are things that they misappropriate, I guess bad behavior in the courtroom. Anything? Have you ladies heard anything about that? Because I don't put information out without doing research. I learned from some of the best of the best. You know what I'm saying? That when a lot of people look at me, and a lot of people, they turn me on before they turn on the local news here these days. So when I put information out, I need to make sure that it's right. So if you ladies ever hear anything like that, and
I have
can show
not.
me where that is, I would love that type of information, because that's where it starts. So over sentencing, you know what I'm saying, harsh sentencing, bias sentences. These are issues that Haiti and I have talked about, and and have done some good, unique work about.
Yes, that's true.
In the background on many cases. And I would just love this information, because I think accountability, like Attorney Rayner has said, and transparency and integrity and dignity inside the courtroom, it must be, it has to be there. And if a judge sits in a highest seat where he or she, you know what I'm saying, can stop a young man from doing 30, 40, 50, 60 years in prison versus a white counterpart, being charged with the same thing, like Attorney O'Pracer said, when she brought the gentleman in with the bias system that he created. I don't understand why every public defender does not have that system in the state of Florida. I want to know what the problem is. I'm not going to hold y'all up, because I shared it on my thing, and I see people, my followers are now
Thank
logging on, and
you,
they're
thank
watching.
you, thank
So,
you for
and
calling in.
I'm just happy, and I just want to, I'm going to continue to watch. But
Thank
I
you.
just want to know if you ladies ever hear anything about that. Please
I have
keep me
not.
abreast for that.
I have not. Thank you for calling in. Thank you for your contribution here and talking about good topics.
Thank
We
you.
always appreciate your voice, because you're a dedicated activist also that likes to fight for good issues. So I'm sure Michele Rayner, if she does win, you will be able to reach out to her to share whatever your concerns are, whatever issues there are to help your community. Thank you for calling. Thank you.
Thank you, Haiti.
Bye.
So I was going to say, Michelle, one thing I like about what Michelle did just bring up is when she was talking about civil rights and your work with advocacy there, right? Because if we're being honest, that's really how a lot of this change agent celebrity status, as Haiti put it, came out.
Well, you know
So
what I meant. I didn't. You know what I meant. She's
she's
recognizable
everywhere. We get
because
it.
she's doing the work. I know.
Yeah, you
I
turn
love
on
you. I
the
Right,
love you.
right,
Mwah.
right.
TV, court TV, you name it. But no, what I'm saying is that so we know you did a lot of work for the three young ladies that drowned a few years back. And then we know that you were very instrumental in not only the arrest, but the conviction of Michael Draca when it came to the Marquise McLaughlin case. So if you're elected, how do you see your advocacy changing? Are you still able to be an advocate for the community, or does that take on a different role at that point?
That's a
it,
great
it just
question.
That's a very good question. It looks different. It just looks different. And so, I actually had this conversation with Bianca, and I had this conversation with Ben Crump, and we talked a lot about, hey, listen, like, because he's the person I do a lot of my civil rights cases with, because I can, he has money. So I just, so there's that. So, and we talked about that, and I really had to kind of wrestle with that, because y'all know I like to be with the people. Like, I like to be with the people. I like to be in the streets. I like to be in the courtroom. And so, I mean, I still will be able to take criminal defense cases, but I think as far as civil rights advocacy, it just has to look different, right? And so, and I think that I'm still advocating, but just on a greater level, on a macro level, and I think about, I'm able to kind of touch one, client, one family, versus being able to do it for the state of Florida. And then also, I think it really starts with the laws. Like, y'all, we have a lot of laws that affect folks that are just not good, and it goes back to the thing, even though I think of, you mentioned Marquise McLaughlin, stand your ground, it's the law, but just because it's the law doesn't make it moral. It doesn't make it right. Slavery was a law. It's not moral. It wasn't right. Jim Crow, and all of those things, were laws, but they weren't moral. They weren't right. And unless you have folks in there who understand, not just like, oh, I think, I get it, and I want to do something, but really understand, really, are able to look at it from a holistic perspective and not just like, well, because I'm an attorney, I need to be there, but from a holistic perspective of how it's affecting the community, how when I press a button to vote, that it's not just going to affect District 70, but it's going to affect folks that don't live in District 70, how it's going to affect Black and brown kids. I think that's where I feel like that's the next natural progression of my advocacy work.
Somebody wants to say hi. Kimberly DeFalco.
Hi, Kimberly.
She wants to say hi to Bianca Goolsby, which, by the way, but let's give a shout out to Bianca. And she is saying MichelleForFlorida.com.
Well, yes, thank you. She's my biggest fan. Besides my mom and dad, she's my biggest fan. So,
and not to mention her agency does marketing. So I mean, you know, good hands.
Come on with that. Come on
Level
with that.
8 agency for those looking.
For those looking, the Level 8 agency.
Exactly.
Candace.
Oh, Candace, we can't hear you, Candace.
Candace.
We can't hear you.
You're muted, or no?
No, she's not muted from my end. Candace. Anyway, while she's getting that together, let's talk about, and it ties in a little bit with Michelle Williams' question about working across the aisle. That's very important.
Yeah.
We've become so divisive in this country, and it's already, I can't take it anymore. I just can't. I want to see good things done. That's what I want. I want to focus on positivity. We know not everyone, even people that we love intensely, we can't agree with every single thing. There's going to be differences and disagreements.
Right.
I want to see candidates, politicians becoming unifiers. That doesn't mean sacrificing or compromising our positions or party principles, but I want you to speak to the importance of being able to, you're already going up, you're already challenged because the majority up in Tallahassee is Republicans. I'm a registered Republican. You know what? And I'm willing to support good Democratic candidates just to level the playing field. So there's not just one agenda that's party based. Okay, so that there's a little bit of a balance there. I'm more of an issues person. I'm more of, is this good? And I don't care who I have to work with.
Right.
Speak to that, Michelle. And what would you do if you go up there as to working across the aisle and promoting bipartisanship?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, because at the end of the day, you know, it's not, you know, a house that is full of Democrats. And, you know, and to the point that I made, you know, people are like, you know, very progressive. How do you think you're going to be able to work across the aisle? And I always come back to two things. One, you know, my whole career is literally working across the aisle. That's my whole career. I'm having to deal with, you know, and work with prosecutors and having to establish relationships. And I think that I'm proud of the relationships I have with prosecutors. I think some are on this right now, but some of the relationships I have with them, where they know that if I say something, that's it. I'm not lying to them. I'm not, you know, manufacturing the truth. So, you know, it's about relationships. It's about establishing relationships. It's about your word being your bond, right? And so understanding that, also finding common ground where I think that you can still be principled, and still be effective, and that they aren't mutually exclusive, right? So you can be principled and say, listen, you know what, Haiti, I can't agree with you on there, but let's see we're talking through this issue, let's see where we can find common ground. And I think that it's going to take work, and you're going to have to work hard to do it. But I think that you can. And also, y'all, like, I've had Republicans donate to my campaign. I have a friend of mine who is literally, we are the complete opposite. We went to law school.
Absolutely.
He's a big old Southern boy, you know, Republican from the North Panhandle. And he was like, I want a Republican for Raider sticker. And I was like, sir, well, we don't agree on anything. And he said something to me that was so powerful. He said, you know, Michelle, we may not agree on a lot. He's like, but I know that you are going to do what's right. I know that you're going to work to find common ground. And I know that you're going to make sure that you keep folks in mind. And he was like, that's why I have no problem supporting you. And to me, and that he wasn't the only friend of mine that did that, right? And to me, that said something of like, dang, like, he knows like where I stand, and he knows what my principles are, but he also knows that, listen, there's going to have to be some agreement for us to be able to move forward. And so, and I think that, you know, it's not just like, hey, you know, I can just build bridges and we're happy go lucky, but understanding it's going to take work to establish those relationships. And I already have some of those already, and it's going to say, every day showing up, my word being my bond, walking in accountability, walking in transparency, walking in integrity. And so I'm excited to be elected. I'm excited to get up there and do that because we have some really serious issues that are happening within the district and happening within our state.
And we still have time left, so the public out there watching this live stream on Facebook or on YouTube, Michele Rayner-Goolsby, she's a Florida candidate for House District 70. The call-in number is 813-221-9700. Go ahead and call in, or you can also write in your questions.
All right.
Bridget.
Can you hear me, guys? Can you hear me now?
Yes, Candace.
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
I'm here.
Okay,
I'm
so
here.
go. You asked something.
That was all great, Michele. And I think so. One of the things that I have found so interesting about the more you get involved in something, and as you're talking about, kind of moving from kind of being on that ground level to being able to help in a different just a different sphere is really what it is. So
Right, yeah.
now you may be able to, instead of being reactive, you may be able to find yourself being more proactive. So what that also comes with is it starts peeling back layers, I would imagine, where you start finding out things that you didn't really notice before and really becoming kind of shocked by that. So you're kind of in that process now. Have you seen anything that you're just like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this, and this is something that I have got to make my mission as I move forward?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that is the short answer. Yeah, I think that, when I look at just how there's so many issues, but the best way I think I can think of is just the unemployment system. And I know I keep coming back to that, but, I think we have to go back to when, Rick Scott did this overhaul, and it was made intentionally not to work for people. And then when you don't really think about it in that moment because we didn't have a pandemic. We didn't have a catastrophe, the hurricanes, really didn't put anybody out of work to that level where it was felt on a whole statewide level. But then to realize that a system was purposely made not to work for working families and working people.
Gosh, yeah.
Let that sit.
Yeah.
You literally intentionally had something to not work or not be effective for working families and working people. And that is to me, we got to get people in Tallahassee with heart that no matter how God has blessed you to excel or ascend, that you never forget the folks who are coming behind you. Mm-hmm. That you always make it a little easier for the folks that are coming behind you. Because at the end of the day, at the bottom end of the day, when I say to whom much is given, much is required, it's not like this, oh yes, but it's literally, I have a duty to make sure that the folks who are behind me, that it's easier for them. I have a duty for a young Black girl to not have to struggle maybe so hard to become an attorney. And Absolutely. That doesn't maybe get asked to be, if you are the court reporter. Mm-hmm. Or the things that I've had to deal with in the last few days of where I'm questioned about my actual personhood. I have a duty to make that easier for them. So if in me being in this capacity makes it easier for families and makes it easier for folks to live an equitable life, then that's just what I'll do.
Yeah.
Michele, we have 3 minutes left. And
3 minutes. This is great.
3 minutes. Yeah, 3 minutes. We're gonna pepper you with questions.
It went by fast. And so I'm gonna leave you the remaining minutes. There's 2 minutes left so that you can address the electorate, the public, the voters, however you wish.
Well, I appreciate you, and thank you again, Haiti, Candace, and Bridget. This has been amazing. It has actually been really what I needed for today. I'm running because I think we're in a moment that requires leadership that leads from the heart, requires leadership that believes in equity for real, and that has a track record of doing it. And, it's not, I say this to folks, and y'all on this call know this, it's not like I don't have anything else I could be doing. This isn't just about a title for me. I didn't just start getting involved. I've been involved. I've been on the ground. And I think that, the pandemic really solidified my and really even the murder of George Floyd, because I've been saying to folks, we have two pandemics that are happening. We have a health pandemic, and we have the pandemic of racism that's been in our country since its inception. And it has really just put this drive in me to really advocate in a way to make things better. And it shouldn't have to take that for us to kind of wake up and get it, but that's where we're at. So, my campaign is based on equity. That's the foundation of my campaign. That's the foundation of why I'm running. That is why I have done the work that I've done. That is why I have advocated the way that I've advocated. And so I just invite folks to get to know me. I know it's really hard right now during the pandemic. We have to social distance and put masks on. But reach out to me on Facebook. Reach out to me via my website, Michele with 1L for Florida.com. This is my heart. It's I don't have to put on. I'm not putting on, but it's my heart to be able to just really make a difference in a way that will change lives. I have a friend that's running for judge, and we joke. She's like, I have to enforce the laws I have, but I need you to get up there to actually change the laws. And I was like, you're absolutely right. And I think we have a moment. I think that, I always get asked, like, well, does this moment feel different for you? With George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, does it feel different, or do you think it's going to be business as usual? And I always say it's going to be business as usual if we make it to be business as usual. And I'm over the business as usual. I'm over, I just want to get there and get a seat and be okay and just say I made it. But what am I doing with the position that the folks have elected me to? Like I said, I have a duty. And so get to know me. And I once again thank y'all so much for this. This has been wonderful. This has been great.
No, thank you for coming on. Thank you for all the work that you do, and it's so nice and refreshing to see it. And just people need to get out and they need to vote, and they need to.
Can we say that vote?
Yeah, they need to vote, and that was part of kind of what was just asked about before when we got the caller, and she was saying, what can we do? Can we start suing the judges personally? You know what we can do? We really have to be more cognizant of voting. Every judge who sits on a bench was either voted or elected in by somebody else or positioned into there by somebody else that was elected. So it all comes down to being is to voting, is to really letting your voice be heard and following people like Michele, who wants to make a difference.
Yeah.
Florida.com, right? Is that the way?
MicheleForFlorida.com. It's Michele with 1L. It's like
no, Michele with 1L. Is that how it goes? Michele with 1L? Because that's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I say Michele with 1L because
it needs to be Michele with 1L for Florida. That's what it needs to be.
Yeah.
It is MicheleForFlorida.com. One day we'll do with Michele with 1L.
You know what? Here, let's do this. Travis Rainey commented,
Travis.
there it is right there. MicheleForFlorida.com.
Yay! Woo.
Okay, it was awesome. Thank you again for coming on.
Thank you.
And good luck.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye,
have a great weekend.
Bye.